The Pacific War, probably the largest air or naval war ever waged. This conflict was one of the major theaters of war during World War II, pitting the Empire of Japan against the United States and its allies. Although the war in the Pacific has not permeated popular culture in the same way other theaters have, there's a decent selection of games set in this theater of operations. You have flight sims, turn-based strategy games, and even a few first-person shooters here and there. But among all those games, there are two that stand out as particularly unique: Battlestations Midway and Battlestations Pacific. This small series, called Battlestations and consisting of only 2 games, featured a smart mix of action and real-time strategy, placing the player at the command of entire task forces, while also letting them take part in the action by allowing direct control of any ship, submarine or aircraft under the player's command. These 2 games, released for PC and Xbox 360 in 2007 and 2009 respectively, are unlike any others in the realm of World War II strategy and action games. And so there you have it, a full-on mission-by-mission retrospective of the first of these 2 hidden gems, Battlestations Midway. Battlestations Midway only covers the first 6 months of the Pacific War, from the opening attack on Pearl Harbor until the climactic Battle of Midway. If you know anything about the war in the Pacific, you probably know that the first 6 months are among the most interesting of this conflict. After the initial attacks on Pearl Harbor and various other places, the Allies were on the back foot and the Japanese were advancing all across the Pacific with near impunity, seemingly unstoppable. The gap in numbers, technology and raw fighting skill was simply too much for the Allies to effectively counteract the Japanese advance. Various small-scale raids were attempted, but nothing that seriously threatened the Japanese. That is, until May 1942, when the Battle of Coral Sea happened. The Japanese attempted to capture Port Moresby, but the Americans sent their aircraft carriers to stop them. This resulted in the first ever carrier battle, and although the outcome of this battle is debatable, the Japanese decided to turn back, giving the Allies their first strategic victory in the Pacific. This Japanese setback would be followed 1 month later by the iconic Battle of Midway, during which the Americans managed to sink 4 of the best Japanese carriers, depriving the Imperial Japanese Navy of a good portion of its power projection, as well as many of its best naval aviators. Although the role of Midway as a turning point or decisive battle has been put into question in recent years, it was definitely a significant victory, and it emboldened the Americans enough to start the Guadalcanal campaign, an even longer and bloodier struggle. But that, my friends, will be a story told in the next game. Now, before I forget, full disclaimer, I play this game with an Xbox controller, but it's completely possible to play it with keyboard and mouse, and from what I understand, this is even the option favored by people who play the game competitively. Now let's get into Battlestations Midway. So, when you first launch the game, you are greeted by this typewriter screen, where you must enter your profile name. I love this typewriter thingy. It's too bad it's used only on this screen. If anything, this is a sign that the game is willing to immerse you in its setting. Then you arrive at the main menu, where you can decide if you're going to play the single player or the multiplayer. Unfortunately, the multiplayer doesn't work with the vanilla game anymore anyway, so let's get into the single player modes. There is the campaign, the Naval Academy, which is the tutorial, and the challenges, which are, simply put, extra missions. If you are like me, when presented with such options, you go to the tutorial first, especially in a game like Battlestations Midway, which features some uncommon mechanics. However, I will spare you the tutorial in this video. It is extremely long and consists of about 10 different missions. It took me almost 1 hour and a half to get through it completely, and it doesn't give the player any freedom. It is very linear and overly scripted to hell and back. However, it does give the player all the information they need, and then some. Indeed, the tutorial missions will teach you how to pilot a ship, how to fire the guns, how to use the tactical map, how to use the repair screen to deal with emergencies, how to manage aircraft carrier operations, such as launching and recovering airplanes, how to use fleet formations, how to command a whole task force, how to pilot an airplane, how to deliver aerial ordnance, how to command squadrons of aircraft, and how to pilot a submarine and hunt enemy ships from below. You can see how such a long list of tutorial missions would be overwhelming to a new player, but it does give a good peek into what regular gameplay will look like. The idea is to command a small force of ships and airplanes, to deploy aircraft when possible, and jump into the action at the player's leisure, although it's often possible to sit back and only use the tactical map. With all that said, let's jump right into the campaign. Please keep in mind that I already completed this game twice in the distant past, but I don't fully remember it. It's been many years. So I'm not going in totally blind, and I do have experience from Battlestations Pacific, but I'm still rediscovering the campaign. I will also play on regular difficulty. Mission 1, stationed at Pearl. Not surprisingly, the first mission is set during the Pearl Harbor attack. To be more precise, the mission begins just before the attack. We are put in the shoes of a young US Navy lieutenant named Henry Walker. Indeed, unlike Battlestations Pacific, this game actually has a story, involving a couple of characters, which is somewhat unexpected for this kind of game. The story element of this game, while not groundbreaking by any stretch of the imagination, is complete with CGI cutscenes. The cutscenes are not AAA, that's for sure, and the character models are a bit stiff, but they do the job. For the first part of this mission, the player controls a single PT boat, a tiny ship armed with a few machine guns, torpedoes, and depth charges.
Hi, sir. Want to take the wheel?
You bet.
PT boats are speedy and maneuverable, and are quite satisfying to control.
Beautiful morning, sir.
Best time of the day. Makes Pearl look like the world's biggest boating pond.
Soon enough, Japanese airplanes start their attack and the whole harbor is set ablaze.
We have incoming enemy aircraft!
The set piece is quite impressive, with a good number of airplanes flying overhead, huge pillars of smoke, and US ships exploding and sinking all around the player. Shooting down Japanese aircraft is immensely fun, more so than I remembered, although it can be tricky to maneuver the boat while firing at airplanes, because you quickly lose track of where you are going.
Sir! Oklahoma's rolling over!
Good God. Poor bastards.
After some time, the player is tasked with sinking a Japanese mini-submarine.
Periscope in the water, sir. Over there. Ready the depth charges. I'll take us in right over her.
The depth charges are dropped automatically when the player gets near the submerged submarine.
Enemy sonar reports the sub is sinking, sir.
We got it! We got it!
The second part of the mission has the player taking control of a P-40 Warhawk for some dogfighting. Some Vals and Kates are returning to their carriers and are ripe for the taking, but there are also some Zeros that can pose a danger to the player. All in all, a worthy representation of the Pearl Harbor attack. I've seen this event play out in many games, and I'd say this is among the best ones.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
This man had his own God and his own family. Why would he attack us? My country's going to war. I'm going with it.
Mission 2: Defense of the Philippines.
I was deployed to the Philippines. Japanese forces were swarming all over the islands. They captured territory north of Luzon, were pushing south.
Get us moving, goddammit! Engine's not firing, sir. No shit, sailor. Keep boosting her. All other hands, man the guns. At least we can take a few of them with us.
It's another PT boat mission designed as a defense mission. The Japanese are attacking an island and the player must prevent the enemy from capturing it. Under the pretext of a mechanical failure, the first part of the mission plays like a fixed turret section, with the player shooting down as many attacking Japanese airplanes as possible.
Enemy squadron is down. Enemy air forces are inbound. Target is burning.
After a few minutes, the engine is repaired and the player must get their PT boat out of the bay and attack the Japanese landing fleet. It's quite fun to sink the transport ships with torpedoes and going after the smaller Daihatsu LCPs with machine guns. Other than that, this is a rather straightforward mission.
Outstanding, Walker. That's the last of them. Don't go taking this as a compliment, but you've just been promoted. I need a man to command a Clemson-class destroyer. Job's yours. Don't let me down.
Mission 3, running the Palawan Passage. In the CGI cutscene before this mission, we learn that our protagonist, Henry Walker, has been given command of his very own destroyer, but that he is upset because he has been assigned to escort duty.
I didn't like it, but I had no choice.
Watch officer, anything to report? Negative, sir. Intelligence suggests the Japs moved in some hours ago, but it looks quieter than Macy's on Christmas morning. Let's hope it stays that way.
Fortunately, this next mission is not an escort mission. In fact, it's more like a blockade running mission. The goal is simply to cross a strait and reach the other side.
That gun battery's gone live. Damn it, they're using our own artillery against us. Helmsman, set a course for evasive action.
During my playthrough of this mission, I was very thorough, and I explored every nook and cranny of the strait in order to find and destroy all the Japanese ships. The main threat comes in the form of enemy PT boats, which can fire torpedoes at your frail destroyer. The PT boats themselves are easily dispatched, but they respawn until you destroy the hangar near the other side of the strait. There are also Japanese floatplanes strafing and dropping bombs on the player. Cleaning the entirety of the passage took a bit too long, but to be fair, the game never asked me to. The game simply asked me to reach the other side. When I did reach the other side, my destroyer was in pretty bad shape, especially after an enemy PT boat successfully hit me with a torpedo.
Sir, Japanese cargo ships ahead. They're sitting ducks. Put them on the coral.
We've been holed, sir. We are coming under enemy fire.
Which, by the way, shows that torpedoes don't have an activation delay in this game, unlike, say, in World of Warships. That said, I didn't care too much about the damage my ship had incurred, because I had almost reached the other side of the strait, and the mission was almost over.
We're taking damage, sir.
We're through the strait, but no sign of any US forces. Sir, ship sighted ahead. It's a Jap destroyer, sir. Look lively, boys. We're not clear yet. Stand by to engage.
However, a nasty surprise was looming on the horizon. An enemy destroyer was waiting for us, and so the stage was set for a destroyer duel. The only issue was that my own destroyer was almost done for, with little HP remaining. Nevertheless, I was determined to fight to the end, and so I pushed forward and dropped the first volley of torpedoes. The enemy destroyer did the same. Fortunately for both of us, both our aims were terrible, and all torpedoes went astray, missing their targets by a long shot. Then we reached artillery range, and the artillery duel began.
We're taking on water, sir. We're taking damage, sir.
One of the greatest strengths of Battlestations Midway compared to Battlestations Pacific is that shells are not as precise and you must actually lead your target when firing your artillery, making for more intense and more immersive firefights.
Fireboard's lit up, sir. We're ablaze.
In this case, it was one of the most harrowing fights I had ever had in this game. Every few seconds my ship was hit and I had to go to the repair screen to assign repair crew to pump water out of the ship and put out fires. It was a really hopeless situation. I sent another volley of torpedoes to my starboard side, went back to the repair screen and suddenly a lucky shot had set the enemy ship on fire, so much so that the fire eventually reached the magazines and the Japanese destroyer exploded all of a sudden. And with the enemy ship going to the bottom, the mission was complete, very much by the skin of my teeth. Also, I love how my second torpedo volley actually hit the sinking wreck of the Japanese ship. The ending CGI cutscene shows that Admiral Hart, Henry's superior, is apparently escaping the Japanese advance by submarine, possibly a reference to MacArthur, who escaped the Japanese onslaught in the Philippines in a PT boat.
A US admiral trying to duck out of the battle by stealth? It was hard to admire. More and more, Hart was personifying everything I thought we were doing wrong in this war.
All in all, a fun mission, although it does illustrate one of the issues in this game. The player has to spend far too much time on the repair screen, so much so that it can distract from the rest of the gameplay. Fortunately, this is not something you have to do when you command a whole fleet, as the AI takes care of it automatically in most cases. The repair screen would also be simplified in the following game. Mission 4: Vengeance at Luzon. In this mission we switch to another character, Henry's buddy Donald Locklear. In practice, though, it doesn't change anything. The first part of this mission is pure air combat. First, the player is placed in a Wildcat and must defend a flight of B-17s while they perform a carpet bombing run against a Japanese airfield. The Zeros are certainly a threat, but the B-17s are very sturdy and don't need too much babysitting. Then the player takes command of dive bombers and must destroy the Japanese capital ship anchored in the bay. This part of the mission follows the regular pattern of a carrier mission. The player must ingress, deliver their ordnance, and then egress and go back to the carrier. Once the dive bomber part is done, the player must do the same with torpedo bombers and follow the same pattern.
This is Bobcat Leader, in Toledo attack run. Remember boys, keep slow and low, slow and low.
This is incredibly fun. Strafing land installations, diving on the ship, flying low to get ready for a torpedo strike. This is Pacific action at its best, and I love it.
Ordnance was on target, sir.
Once all ordnance has been dropped, a cutscene plays, and we learn that the capital ship we just sunk was the wrong target. The real target is a battleship, and unfortunately, this new threat is fast approaching the USS Lexington. In the second part of the mission, the player must direct air operations from the aircraft carrier Lexington. The first step is, of course, to deploy available squadrons to form an airstrike, ideally complete with fighter escort. The game allows for 5 Dauntlesses, which are dive bombers, 5 Avengers, torpedo bombers, and only 2 Wildcats, fighters. This is not much, but more aircraft are sitting in reserve in the carrier hangars. The enemy battleship is escorted by only 2 destroyers and a handful of Zeros. The issue with this mission is that, like in real life, the player must sit idle while the carrier launches its aircraft, and it quickly becomes a bit boring, and I wish there were a time compression option. When the airstrike is ready, the minimap can be used to direct all aircraft to attack the target. Battleship Fuso. In my experience, in regular difficulty mode, a decently successful attack will reduce the enemy battleship's HP by about 45%, which means 3 attacks are needed to send the ship to the bottom. Each individual attack is a lot of fun, attacking ships from the air, diving through AA fire. The game executes these ideas perfectly. The only issue is, again, that after each attack, surviving aircraft must be sent back to the carrier to replenish their ammunitions, go back to the hangar and then be redeployed, and it takes several minutes each time. Several minutes of not doing much. Fortunately, it's easy to forgive those moments of downtime because the whole experience of directing carrier operations is simply one of the most immersive World War II carrier experiences you can have in a video game. Once the Fuso eventually goes down, the mission is over. The CGI cutscene that plays at the end of this mission shows a seemingly random high-ranking Japanese officer smashing his drinkware out of frustration. All in all, this mission is the first mission of the campaign that truly achieves the experience this game aims to deliver. Mission 5, Raid on Balikpapan.
Sit down, Mr. Walker. Headquarters are uniting Southeast Asia Allied forces under a joint American, British, Dutch, Australian command, identified as Abdicom, based out of Java.
The 5th mission in the game places the player at the head of a small force of 2 destroyers. The mission is extremely simple. Attack a Japanese convoy anchored at a small naval base. There are no twists this time, just go in there and wreak havoc.
We're taking damage, sir!
This is a nighttime mission, although in practice this is rather irrelevant. The Japanese base is protected by a land fortress, several PT boats, and at least 2 destroyers, and there are 7 convoy ships to sink.
Fireboard's lit up, sir! We're ablaze!
The destroyers can pose a threat, so there will certainly be some brawling. Other than that, the convoy ships are static, so it's easy to take aim and sink them.
We did it! She's heading for the coral!
That was the last of them, sir. Good work. Now all we gotta do is get the hell out of here.
Not the most complex of missions, but its simplicity works in its favor, in my opinion. Mission 6, Holding the Lombok Strait. In this mission, the player must defend an island against several waves of aircraft and surface ships. The first part of the mission takes place entirely in the air. 4 or 5 waves of Japanese aircraft will attack, and given that each wave is quite easy to defeat, I feel like this part of the mission is a bit too long. I could have done with 1 or 2 fewer waves. In the second half of the mission, several transport ships escorted by a cruiser and 3 destroyers are heading directly for the island. However, they are spotted pretty far away from the coast, giving the player some time to soften up the convoy as much as possible before it reaches the shoreline. This part of the mission is actually fun. It has the same issue as in Mission 4, which is to say that there are moments of downtime. You deploy aircraft, wait for them to get airborne, then you must wait for them to reach their target, and then you must wait for them to return to base. However, it doesn't detract from the fun of the mission, and the fight becomes more and more intense as the Japanese invasion fleet approaches. Fortunately, I had concentrated all my first attacks on the enemy cruiser, which is by far the most serious threat. But the 3 destroyers are also dangerous to deal with. Especially when approaching the enemy fleet with frail PT boats, it can get pretty scary. Look at all this artillery fire on all these stray bullets. And look at that volley of torpedoes! Bam! Well, 2 torpedoes missed the target, but no matter. The enemy vessel has been breached below the waterline and will sink soon enough.
She's going down!
When the enemy force got close enough to the beaches, I got bored and I sorted the destroyer USS John D. Ford. But after some intense fighting against an enemy destroyer, the John D. Ford's magazines detonated, and that was an instant game over. Pretty frustrating because triggering a game over screen over the loss of one specific unit can seem a bit arbitrary, although it makes some sense in the context of the game's story, since Henry is aboard this destroyer. Still, this is war and we didn't sign up for a walk in the park after all. My second go at the mission was successful, fortunately. As a side note, in this mission, units are deployed from an airfield on a harbor. The harbor can deploy PT boats as well as Catalinas, but I find it questionable that the Catalina cannot land back to base to replenish ammunition. Once a Catalina has fired its torpedoes, the only way to replace it is to crash the Catalina on purpose and deploy a new one. Some bonus tips. During the first part of the mission, enemy aircraft arrives from the west. They spawn between the numbers 4 and 5 on the western edge of the map. You can safely deploy 4 squadrons of P-40s. Then, during the second part of the mission against the Japanese surface fleet, you can safely deploy only strike planes, torpedo bombers and dive bombers, as there are no enemy fighters. Only consider deploying P-40s when the enemy start deploying LCPs, as P-40s are very well suited to strafe those little ships.
Enemy forces were repelled at Bali, but it was all for naught because Java was lost. Abdicom had been stood down. Hart left and handed command of the Houston over to me. I gave the crew 24 hours to get her seaworthy again.
Mission 7 – Rendezvous in the Java Sea. In this mission, the player finally gains command of a cruiser, the USS Houston, certainly an upgrade from the destroyers and PT boats we've experienced until now.
Those are Val's. Sound general quarters.
The mission begins with the player's task force falling under attack by several waves of strike aircraft, dive bombers at first and torpedo bombers second. The dive bombers managed to sink one of my destroyers, and the torpedo bombers were able to hit me with a couple of torpedoes. Shooting down aircraft with AA gun is as satisfying as ever. Following the air attacks, an enemy submarine is spotted, and it's up to one of the destroyers to take care of it. The Houston just has to make sure to dodge any incoming torpedoes.
with the Brits.
The second part of the mission has the Houston finally rendezvous with the British ships, which immediately fall under the player's command. But the British are themselves engaged by a Japanese cruiser accompanied by some destroyers. This makes for an interesting naval firefight, with lots of torpedoes moving around.
She's had it! Sir, we're under attack! Enemy ship spotted, sir.
Multiple smokestacks sighted, sir. Headed our way.
Looks like the Haruna's caught up with us.
Once the Japanese cruiser and its escort goes down, an even bigger threat appears, a Japanese battleship, the Haruna. Fortunately, the player also receives help from a nearby US submarine, making it possible to torpedo the Haruna from below.
In the end, it became an RV you wouldn't wish for. After the battle, I was recalled to Pearl, on the personal authority of Admiral Nimitz.
Mission 8, Strike on Tulagi.
There'd be no more running away from battle. Recon had located enemy bases on Tulagi. We made good speed to our RV, but Lexington wasn't on station yet.
Ah, at last, we are getting closer to the first major battle of the Pacific War. Historically, the strike on Tulagi on May 4, 1942 was the first step towards the Battle of the Coral Sea. The USS Yorktown was sent to the Coral Sea in order to prevent or deter a Japanese invasion of Port Moresby, and on the way, the Yorktown took the opportunity to strike the Japanese seaplane base at Tulagi. In this mission, which simulates this event, the player takes control of USS Yorktown and must manage carrier air operations with the objective of destroying the airfield and seaplane bases on Tulagi. The Japanese will put up a fight by sending attack aircraft towards the Yorktown. There are also cruisers and destroyers defending the island. Fortunately, the player also has a flight of 3 B-70s heavy bombers, useful to take care of the enemy airfield. Nevertheless, the number of targets to attack and the number of threats to defend against force the player to quickly juggle between available squadrons, rotating aircraft on the Yorktown's flight deck.
Position, sir. We have incoming enemy aircraft. We got him! Enemy squadron is down! We did it! She's heading for a coral.
In the second part of the mission, the player must escort some LSTs as they attempt to land on Tulagi.
We're drawing fire from a land battery. We need assistance now.
Copy that, Major. We'll take care of it.
This is not too complicated, but it's strangely ahistorical, as the US never attempted a landing on Tulagi at this time. The US would only invade Tulagi 3 months later, during the Guadalcanal campaign.
Tulagi 10日。米軍にとってはかなりの打撃でしょう、長官。素晴らしい。米軍の航空母艦の所在が分かったわけだ。我が軍は奴らを撃沈できる。
Mission 9, Battle of the Coral Sea. This is it, the mission that simulates the very first carrier battle in history, the Battle of the Coral Sea.
Did you know that coral is actually an animal?
The player takes command of the Yorktown. The USS Lexington is also here, but it's damaged and cannot take part in the battle. This is shown is the intro cutscene for this mission, which is done in-engine and is pretty well realized.
Stand by, stand by. Enemy aircraft inbound. This is Lexington. We've taken multiple hits, our flight deck is out of commission, and we have fires in our fuel bunkers. We're out of the fight, deploying damage control.
However, the game takes a few liberties while recreating the battle. In real life, the Lexington was indeed damaged during the battle, but air operations were still possible and the ship was only scuttled after the main action took place. In this mission, the player must make the best possible use out of the Yorktown to find and sink 2 Japanese aircraft carriers. What the game doesn't tell you is that you do not need to sink them. Seriously damaging them is enough to complete the mission. This is where Battlestation's unique gameplay truly shines. The player needs to deploy fighters for combat air patrol, but they also need to send strike aircraft towards the Japanese ships. Only 4 squadrons per carrier can be deployed at a time, so it's up to the player to determine the right proportions. Do you deploy 2 fighter squadrons for a more robust defense? Sure, but you will only have 2 strike squadrons to attack the enemy ships. Do you deploy 3 strike squadrons? Alright, but then you will only have 1 fighter squadron to defend against the many attacking aircraft. The player can then take part in the many smaller engagements, piloting a fighter to take down Japanese aircraft before they can reach the Yorktown, piloting a dive bomber and weave through the enemy AA to drop a bomb on the enemy carrier, or taking direct control of the US carrier to maneuver and evade incoming torpedoes. When the enemy actively sends units against you, there is far less downtime to worry about and the game becomes more intense. As stated before, the mission ends when enough damage has been dealt to enemy carriers. That's too bad because I really wanted to finish off at least 1 carrier, but oh well.
Nice work! That was a direct hit!
Sir, the carrier group is turning around. They're retreating.
The outro CGI cutscene for this mission shows Donald, Henry's friend, being unfortunately killed in action on the deck of the Yorktown. The game never truly has time to develop any character arc for Donald, so his death doesn't have a huge emotional impact.
Another $10 says I'll outrank you within 6 months. This war ain't over yet.
And it's too bad because I really like his wink just before the Zero crashes into his plane. It makes his death a bit more poignant. By the way, in this cutscene we see several Japanese planes crashing into the US carrier, which is quite strange because kamikaze attacks didn't start until October 1944, more than 2 years later. I don't know if the cutscene was trying to depict actual kamikaze attacks, but if that's the case, it's historically inaccurate. Overall, one of the best missions of the campaign thus far. Mission 10, Turning Point at Midway. We jump straight from Coral Sea to an even more iconic air and naval battle, the all-important Battle of Midway.
How's Jack?
Admiral Fletcher's pretty battered, sir, but he'll pull through.
Well, the Yorktown's in even worse shape. Yard Chief tells me she needs 3 months in dry dock. I've ordered him to have her ready in 3 days. Whether she makes it or not, I don't have many options, Captain. You're going to Midway without her. We've broken the Japanese signal codes. Intercepts suggest the enemy is planning to invade Midway.
This is Scout 1. I have visual. Many planes headed Midway, bearing 320, distance 150. Repeat, many planes headed Midway.
This is it. All hands, general quarters.
The game once again takes some liberties with historical events, but the broad strokes are historically accurate. The player must first defend the Midway atoll itself, because Japanese aircraft are about to attack the airfields there. Thus, the first part of the mission is pure air combat. The Japanese are not kidding, and there are really a lot of dive bombers on the offensive, and some will inevitably break through Midway's air defenses.
All fire, we are friendly. Enemy air forces are inbound. Enemy plane is going down.
The second part of the mission is to prevent the Japanese from landing ground forces on Midway by sinking their transport ships. This is quite easy because they have no air cover, so the player can simply deploy strike aircraft until the invasion fleet is gone. It's important to keep at least one squadron of Buffalo fighters around because fighters are very good at sinking the small LCPs.
She's had it. Nice work. That was a direct hit.
Once the invasion fleet is sunk, the third and final phase of the mission is to repel 2 Japanese aircraft carriers, and this time the objective is not simply to damage them but to sink them outright. The Japanese aircraft carriers can deploy a large number of aircraft, making defending the Midway airfield a challenge.
Sir, recon reports that enemy carriers are preparing to launch another airstrike. We have a lock on their location now. It's time to counterattack.
Fortunately, the Yorktown also enters the area not too long after, giving the player a bit more firepower.
I'm on board this Navy's finest goddamn fighting vessel. You didn't think the Yorktown would be a no-show at your party, did you? My air group are on their way to you now.
Welcome to Midway, Admiral.
I will say though that it's annoying that the game is interrupted by a cutscene when the Yorktown arrives. I was in the middle of a torpedo strike when it happened, so it was a bit frustrating. Fortunately, the game pauses completely during the cutscene, but I would have preferred a simple in-game audio message.
Hell, it's good to have you in the fight, sir.
No way Yorktown and I were going to miss out on this one. Now let's win this battle.
Sir, runway 1 has been destroyed. Damn it! There go our fighter reserves.
We got one. Ordnance was on target, sir.
By the time I gained control of the Yorktown, I had already sunk one of the 2 Japanese carriers.
Sir, enemy carrier burning! She's going down! Keep fighting! We can win this!
Nevertheless, I immediately began deploying aircraft in preparation for an attack against the remaining Japanese carrier. But before my final airstrike even began, 2 squadrons of B-17s from Midway that I had deployed a few minutes earlier managed to sink the last enemy carrier, ending the mission. Although the mission is not completely historically accurate, it's still an excellent mission that once again takes its strength from the game's unique gameplay. However, this mission is only the first half of the Battle of Midway. 2 Japanese carriers remain to be fought, and the final showdown will take place in the next mission. Mission 11, Endgame at Midway. This is it, the final mission. The goal is simple. Find and destroy the remaining 2 Japanese aircraft carriers.
All hands, battle stations!
This is a fairly symmetrical engagement, with 2 US carriers facing off against 2 Japanese carriers. To spice things up, the Japanese also have a few more assets at their disposal. Most notably, they have a couple of submarines that will attack the player's carriers with torpedoes, and they also have a few cruisers already deployed in the area, plus a few more arriving later during the mission.
Captain, we've spotted an enemy recon plane.
Like in a real carrier battle, the first order of business is to locate the enemy carriers. The player has 2 Catalinas at their disposal that they can use for recon, although they are equipped with depth charges, so they could also be useful near the carrier to protect them against submarines. To be honest, the first submarine caused some issue because the Catalinas on the destroyers took a bit too long to take care of it, forcing the carriers to maneuver to dodge torpedoes. The genius of this mission is that the location of the enemy carriers is randomized each time you play, so you truly have to send recon planes to scout the area until you can find the enemy fleet. And when you do, then it's time to go all out and deploy dive bombers and torpedo bombers. Sinking the carriers will require several airstrikes. Torpedo bombers are the most effective way to sink ships, but they are quite fragile, so performing torpedo strikes in this mission can be intense. Nevertheless, the aircraft have to get through, and once both Japanese carriers are down, the Battle of Midway is over and the mission ends. This final mission is a quintessential experience this game aims to offer. A great single-player carrier battle was the perfect way to cap off this campaign. I just wish the final CGI cutscene was a bit longer. It's fine as it is, but it really feels like an afterthought.
No right to win. But win we did. With one battle we changed a war. The last time I sat on this beach, Donald told me not to wish for war. He was right. I've seen more blood flow than any man should see in a lifetime. 2 lives, united by death. Godspeed, gentlemen.
The campaign is now over, but the game has a few more goodies to offer. There are several challenge missions for ships, submarines and airplanes, acting as mini campaigns of their own. Let's take a brief look at these missions as well, shall we? Ship Challenge 1 – Strike on the Monster. In the first ship challenge, the player is given command of the Japanese battleship Fuso, and the goal is simply to reach a waypoint far to the west. It's pretty hard, because the Americans are sending a huge number of destroyers, cruisers and even several battleships near the end of the level. The level is honestly a bit too long. It's more efficient to let the AI fire the guns, so the player only has to manage the repairs and evade torpedoes. Ship Challenge 2 – Battle of the Java Sea. In the second ship challenge, the player commands a Japanese cruiser and 2 destroyers and must fight off several US cruisers, one after the other, and they are all accompanied by 2 or 3 destroyers. It's good on simple naval surface action. Since aiming can be tricky, I mostly let the AI do all the firing and I simply supervise the general direction of the fight and perform repairs when needed. During one of my attempts, I had not noticed that one of the US cruisers was luring me out of the map, and I had the most stupid game over you can possibly have in this game. Ship Challenge 3 – Hunt for the Cruiser. Interestingly, in this third ship challenge, the task is to find and destroy the Japanese cruiser we were playing as in the previous level, the IGN Nachi. The player had 3 destroyers at their disposal. The first objective is to rendezvous with a recon plane, fighting off a few enemy destroyers on the way.
Torpedoes incoming! Take evasive action!
When the player gets close to the recon plane, it takes off and starts flying south, but the player cannot give it any order. This Catalina flies of its own volition. In my attempt at the mission, I started going east to escape an incoming Japanese cruiser approaching from the west. That was a good call because I stumbled upon the Nachi, which was also loitering east of my position. I don't know if the location of the Nachi changes each time the level is loaded. In any case, sinking the Nachi was a piece of cake, especially if you order all your destroyers to use their torpedoes freely. So I'd say this ship challenge was significantly easier than the previous 2. The real difficulty is the secondary objective, which is to keep all 3 destroyers alive. By the way, the lightning is gorgeous in this mission. Look at that sun. This game can be beautiful when it wants to. Ship Challenge 4 – Might of Yamato. At last, the game places the player at the helm of the mightiest battleships of all, the all-powerful Yamato. This mission is a what-if scenario that takes place just after the main action at Midway. Yamato is ordered to pursue the American carriers Enterprise and Hornet and sink them outright. In practice, this level is mostly going in a straight line to the north until you reach the US carriers. An uninterrupted flow of enemy strike planes will incessantly attack the Yamato with bombs and torpedoes, and there's not much that can be done about it. The Yamato just has to suffer through it. The Yamato has pretty powerful flak guns and it is escorted by a cruiser and 2 destroyers for additional AA support. But the sheer number of US airplanes means the Yamato will take damage, and it's not really possible to dodge all the ordnance delivered at it. There are even a couple of enemy submarines that will appear and fire additional volleys of torpedoes at Yamato. Nevertheless, the level is rather easy because the Yamato can actually take that much punishment, and once the enemy carriers are in range of the battleship's powerful guns, they don't stand a chance. Ship Challenge 5, Raid on Truck. This last ship challenge doesn't really feel like a ship challenge, and maybe that's for the best, because it's by far the best level out of all the so-called ship challenges. This mission starts with a dogfight. For the first time the player can pilot the P-38 Lightning, and it's a joy to control. It is extremely maneuverable, and its cannons can cut down zeros in the blink of an eye. After the initial dogfight, the player gains access to the US carrier Enterprise, and must deploy strike planes to destroy a few enemy fortresses. This is in order to clear a path for USS Iowa, the most powerful US battleship. Attacking the fortress can be tricky because the Japanese also have an airfield in the east, and they will send fighters to intercept the player's strike planes, as well as strike planes to attack the Enterprise. Managing all the threats while completing the objective is key here. Once the fortresses are destroyed, the Iowa arrives. The goal is to sink Japanese ships escaping the area. It's very challenging because the Iowa will inevitably take a lot of damage, and the timing to intercept the escaping ships is very tight. Definitely one of the best missions in the whole game.
She's had it! Enemy squadron destroyed, sir. Sir, we've lost contact with our squadron.
And that's it for the ship challenges. Now let's take a look at the plane challenges. Plane Challenge 1, Shortage of Reinforcements. This level is short and sweet. The player must jump in the cockpit of an Oscar, a Japanese fighter plane, and sink a bunch of US cargo ships. This is made more challenging by the presence of enemy fighters. Still, the Oscar is far superior to the American Buffaloes, and the cargo ships can be made to explode if you know where to aim, so this level is actually pretty easy. Plane Challenge 2, Saving Tulagi. The previous level was very short. Well, the next one is pretty long, but its structure is very simple. The player has an airfield and must deploy fighters to defend against several waves of enemy units. First, B-17s are approaching from the south and must be dealt with before they can bomb the airfield. Then, the player must defend a pair of destroyers against Dauntlesses and Avengers coming from the west. Then the player must protect the jetty buildings against incoming Dauntlesses from the east. This is the most dangerous part of the level. The timing is very tight. Finally, the last objective is to prevent a US landing. As usual, the tricky part is to choose between attacking the LCPs or attacking the transport ships. Destroying the LCPs is the most pressing task, but since the transport ships deploy LCPs incessantly, they are also a priority target. All in all, a pretty long level, not the most interesting, but it does the job as a challenge level. Plane Challenge 3 Attack on Force Z. Interestingly, the attack on Force Z, a real historical event from the opening weeks of the Pacific War, would be revisited as an official campaign mission in the following game, Battlestations Pacific. But for now, it is the setting for this last plane challenge. The level is set up this way. There are two islands, one is the north and one is the south, each sporting a Japanese airfield. Two British battleships as well as a carrier and escort destroyers are coming from the west and are set to pass between the islands. You, the player, have access to both airfields, and it's up to you, the player, to sink both British battleships before they reach the eastern edge of the map. The airfield can deploy G3M Nell and G4M Betty bombers, which are Japanese medium bombers that can carry either bombs or aerial torpedoes. Since torpedoes are better suited to sink ships, equipping the bombers with torpedoes is probably the best option here. Which means that this level is torpedo run upon torpedo run, and it's glorious. As usual, it's better to be patient and gather all available bombers before attacking, so that your strike group has a better chance of breaking through the intense enemy AA fire. The amount of planes, ships and torpedoes in this level make for quite the spectacle. And with the plane challenges out of the way, we can now focus our attention on the last type of single-player content, the submarine challenges. Submarine Challenge 1 – Crucial Cargo. The primary objective in the first submarine challenge is to attack a Japanese convoy. However, the twist is that only 2 specific ships must be sunk out of all the cargo ships present, and these 2 ships are randomly selected each time the level is loaded. To be clear, the player can sink as many ships as they want, but in order to complete the mission, these 2 randomly selected ships must be sunk. The convoy is escorted by a couple of destroyers as well as a cruiser. The first destroyer is particularly annoying, but it can be sunk from the get-go with a pair of well-placed torpedoes. After that, sinking the 2 ships is a matter of positioning, aiming, and most of all, patience. The lack of activation delay for torpedoes in this game is a blessing, because it means that you can fire your torpedoes at the last moment. Although, of course, if you fire too late, your torpedoes can also go under the hull of the target and miss entirely. I find the submarine gameplay to be both a matter of skill and a matter of patience. Submarine Challenge 2 – Periscopes Threatening. In this level, the goal is to sink a small allied task force, a battleship, a light cruiser and 3 destroyers. Obviously, the 3 destroyers pose the greatest threat to the player's submarine, so they should be sunk in priority. Not how I dealt with this destroyer. It was on my heels, so I surfaced just long enough for the other surface ships to fire at me, and because their aim is so bad, they actually scored hits on their own destroyer, forcing it to change course, allowing me to easily sink it with torpedoes. Once the destroyers are gone, sinking the battleship and the cruiser is a matter of formality. Just keep an eye on your oxygen reserve. Being forced to surface among enemy ships is not a pleasant experience. Submarine Challenge 3, Coup de Grâce. The last submarine challenge has the player commanding a force of 2 Japanese submarines, with the order of sinking USS Enterprise. The submarines are far apart from each other, and the objective, the Enterprise, is also a good distance away to the east. In my experience, the South submarine will take the brunt of the enemy anti-submarine assets, while the North submarine is free to navigate towards the Enterprise without opposition. During this mission, I perfected the art to surface when about to be depth charged. By surfacing and diving in quick succession, you can prevent the enemy from using their depth charges, and the risk of artillery fire will also be reduced since you can go underwater quickly, not to mention that nearby enemy ships may even hit the enemy destroyer by mistake. I still got sunk in the end because you can't escape destroyers, airplanes and PT boats indefinitely either. But it gave enough time for my other submarine to reach the Enterprise and hit it with 4 torpedoes. Apparently this wasn't enough, so I launched an additional 2 torpedoes from my rear tubes, but a PT boat managed to sink my submarine. I was so close. You can even see my last 2 torpedoes nearly missing the carrier during the game over cutscene. After that, I retried the mission several times, and I can't even remember if I ever was successful. I don't think I have footage of completing this mission. This is a fun but really difficult mission. And with that, we have reached the end of the single-player content for Battlestations Midway. Of course, there's much more fun to be had with mods, including new missions, new campaigns, and even the possibility of playing the multiplayer maps against an AI opponent. This last option is made possible thanks to the international BSM mode made by the BS Mode HQ team. In the end, what to think about Battlestations Midway? In my opinion, this game is one of the most comprehensive games set in the Pacific theater of World War II. The 3 main types of gameplay are all well represented, and the layer of strategy only adds to the experience. Diving on an enemy ship with a Dauntless, performing torpedo runs from the air, dogfighting Zeros with a Wildcat, firing the big guns of a battleship, stealthily approaching an enemy convoy and firing volleys of torpedoes from a submarine, managing flight deck operations from the bridge of a US carrier, this game has it all in a well-presented and immersive package. However, the game is not without its own quirks and flaws. Some single-player missions suffer from downtime as it can take a bit too long for air units to take off, travel to their destination and come back, although this is far less noticeable in missions with several air bases, fortunately. When controlling a ship, aiming naval artillery can feel a bit clunky, especially because the game heavily incentivizes the player to use the binoculars. Still, I will say having to lead the target is far superior to the auto-aim found in the following game. Still, it's often better to let the AI do the firing, and this results in manual surface ship combat being not that interesting, unlike plane or submarine gameplay. An active pause would have been most welcome, because giving orders to several units in a row doesn't feel very smooth, and can even be a bit frustrating, especially when playing with an Xbox controller. Finally, I find that one of the main faults with Battlestations Midway is its lack of single-player content. A campaign of 11 missions and 11 challenges is quite decent on paper, but in practice it feels a bit short. The developers from Eidos aimed to correct some of these flaws in the following game, Battlestations Pacific, in ways that can sometimes be considered divisive among the community. As we will see in the Battlestations Pacific retrospective, I still consider Pacific to be superior to Midway overall, especially when it comes to vanilla single-player content. But there are things from Midway that I miss in Pacific, such as the crisper graphics, the more challenging aiming, and the more maneuverable airplanes. One thing I haven't talked about yet in Battlestations Midway is the music. Like the graphics, this orchestral soundtrack is crisper and more subtle in Midway, compared to Pacific, where it becomes more bombastic. And I have to say, I absolutely love the music in both of these games. It can be calm, contemplative, optimistic, stately, tense, nervous, engaging, heroic, ominous, martial, victorious, the whole range of moods the player will experience in the game is covered by the music, and then some, and it's everything I want in such a World War II game. Well, that about covers it for the official single-player content in Battlestations Midway. I would like to make a video dedicated to the skirmish mode versus AI, made possible by the good people at BS Mod HQ, because there are many great missions in there too, but that may be for another time. I hope you enjoyed this little mission-by-mission review of Battlestations Midway, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Kupanik over and out.